This is an interview with Ms. Carolyn McKinstry for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley, presently at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is April 23rd, 1998. Ms. McKinstry, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. In fact, you just driven back from Atlanta to come and sit and talk with me today about Birmingham and the movement. Welcome to the Institute.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. It's always good to share the historical aspects of things that we've lived through and are still living through.
That's right. You've been so generous with that. All kinds of people from all over the world, I think. Let me just ask you about your parents. Were your parents from Birmingham? First of all, were you born in Birmingham?
I was born in Clanton, Alabama, which is about 56 miles from here, and Chilton County, and lived there until I was 2 years old, and then my parents moved to Birmingham.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 4 brothers, 1 sister,
Okay.
and I'm in the middle of 2 boys older, 2 boys younger, and then my sister is the baby.
Oh, okay. When your family moved to Birmingham, what neighborhood did they move to?
We moved to, it's called the Ellsbury community, but it is a zip code.
Okay.
It's 16th Street and Finley Avenue, but also known as Ellsbury Park, also known as a zip code.
Oh, okay. Then were you raised up in a zip code?
Yes.
Okay. What about your parents' educational backgrounds? How much education did they have?
Both my parents taught school, and my dad taught physics and chemistry. Had a master's degree in that, and waited tables at night, but taught school during the day. And my mom had a degree in elementary education.
Where did they teach?
My father retired from Huffman High School. However, he was part of Parker High School when it still had the name Industrial High School.
Okay.
He taught there for many years under that name, and then under the Parker name, and then under the Carver High School name, and was subsequently moved to Huffman when the integration order came.
Okay,
He
so
was one of the
the
teachers.
first teachers that went out to Huffman.
Right.
I'm sure he had some interesting stories to tell about that.
He did. He did.
And your mother, where did she teach?
My mom retired from Pratt Elementary School. Some of the schools that she taught, when she first came to Birmingham, she was at Hooper City Elementary School, which is not there anymore. She taught at Northside, which is not there anymore, and actually Pratt is not there anymore either.
Right.
She also taught at Lewis Elementary, and there's one other one in there somewhere, but she retired from Pratt.
From Pratt.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in Sipco, what kind of community was Sipco?
Well, I probably wouldn't have seen it this way at that time, but it was probably a fairly middle-class neighborhood. We had quite a few professional people there. There were any number of teachers that lived on our street. In fact, my 8th grade teacher lived on my street, and my 7th grade teacher lived on 2 streets behind me. So, it's quite common then to have your teachers or a principal living close by. Also, one of probably 2, if I got that right. During that time, we had 2 maybe black CPAs in the city of Birmingham, and one of those lived directly across the street. Maurice Rouse, one of our bondsmen during that time, but we knew him because he owned the vending company too, and we could sometimes get old records from him. And in fact, one of my brothers worked with him for a long time, and when he would travel to the different little cities stocking the record machines, raw colas or whatever, then he paid him to travel with him. So we knew all these people quite well, and they took quite an interest in what you did, and it's particularly if you were doing well in things. So.
Were there people that worked at Sipco, at the mill or the plant, that lived in your general area? Now you were in Ellsbury.
Ellsbury Park.
So was that sort of an enclave of?
Some of the people that were in my neighborhood during that time, Dr. Jesse Lewis lived directly behind me. Let me see if I can think of some of them. Mr. Shortridge, who they had a funeral home at that time, was right on the corner.
Very active in the movement.
Yes. Let's see. Mrs. Crowell, whose husband was the CPA, and of course she was an art instructor, had 2 boys away on that American Friends program. On the back street, there were a couple of other people I'm trying to remember that you would know, but Jesse Lewis is who stands out. Let's see if I can think a little bit further down. Most of the people in that immediate 3 or 4 block area were in fairly professional jobs. Now, probably about 3 blocks down Finley Avenue toward the farmer's market, where my elementary school was where a lot of my classmates and friends lived. And a lot of those children, their parents worked at places like Asipco or TCI, and I remember Stockham, several of them had parents working at Stockham. During that time, Horace, I don't know if you ever saw, there were Army barracks that lined.
Yes, I vaguely remember that because I had some relatives that lived in that general area.
From the school to the farmer's market, there were these rows of Army barracks. And a lot of my friends lived in those. And I had a couple of occasions when I went by after school and got a chance to see the inside. For the most part, my mom didn't let us visit or go inside anyone else's home. But it was just an interesting phenomenon. We thought the Army barracks being there. And but you know, there was a very strong sense in the school and in the classroom of everybody sort of in sync toward the same goal. There really was never, I'm not aware of any distinctions being made as far as where anybody worked, whose parents did what. A couple of the kids at the school, parents actually taught at the school. But each teacher, I guess the teachers at that time understood that it really didn't matter who your parents were to the real world. In the grand scope of things, you know, we were all pretty much in the same boat, and they understood that.
You don't think there were any advantages, Rob, because one was middle class and one was from a working class family in the school situation? Were there any distinctions between lighter skinned children and dark skinned children?
You know, I honestly don't think, I didn't see that. And I'm not saying that concept didn't exist, that there were some, there may have been at some points a little preferential treatment, but I honestly didn't see it. We had children in my classes that were on welfare, but we didn't know it. They received free lunches, but we didn't know it, because the teachers never made you aware of who was doing what. And it just seemed to me that the teachers I had made a very fair attempt. Sometimes it might be the fairer skinned children that needed extra help, or it might be a child whose parent was a teacher, or it might be one of those children living in the Army barracks. But we had, during that time, we had rows. Row number 1 obviously was the smarter row. And if you were in that row and everybody finished their work, then you were obliged to help the children in row number, say, 6 or 7 until they came along. And so, you know, in that sense, you felt helpful, you felt useful, you felt smart. And I know I did. I was permitted to do, to work in the office. I did in elementary school. I did a lot of things that probably would have been things that other children would have done at a later age. And I think that's why I ended up working at the church as the clerk. I started doing that in 8th grade, and all the way through high school, I was the person that kept the attendance records and the money and so forth. So,
what elementary school did you attend?
Finley Avenue, elementary school.
Now, Finley Avenue, how near was that to your home?
I walked to school every day. It was probably, in terms of blocks, city blocks, 3 blocks. Wasn't I could walk home just average pace about 7 minutes.
What stands out in your mind most about Finley Avenue? The school.
Well, a couple of things. When I started school, it was in January. We were still doing the half years. And I was in the last class to start in January. I was 6 years old, but I was always a very bright student, so I didn't have to complete the first grade. They just sent me right on to the second grade, and that's kind of how I got caught up with the rest of the kids. Claude Wesley, no, James Goodson, Dr. Goodson was my principal, grades 1 through 6. Grade 7 and 8 was Claude Wesley, Dr. Claude Wesley. When I was in the 8th grade there, you know, I participated in Dr. A.G. Gaston's annual spelling contest. And that contest was held locally as a city contest and then a countywide. And the winners from the counties competed on the state level. And I, of course, went on to win on the state level. So probably during the time that I was at Finley, that was, I was an honor student, but that was probably my most outstanding accomplishment, I guess. And
so you had some real good vibes about your experiences in elementary school.
I really did. My teachers made me feel that I was capable. They didn't spoil you. You know, there were many times when we would be practicing this spelling contest. They would rehearse me sometimes from lunchtime, 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And as a child, you know, I just really got sick of it. And there would be days I cried, I didn't want to do it anymore. And they would just sort of ignore it. They wouldn't pamper me. They wouldn't say, well, we understand. They said, why don't you go down to the cafeteria and get a Coke? Tell the, yeah, and I thought that was really special because we didn't have machines when I was in elementary school, and a Coke was a real treat. You could even bring money and buy a Coke, so they would do little things like that for me. But I felt very grounded. I felt very capable and very comfortable with their direction. I felt that no matter whatever else I may have seen in their personalities, that ultimately my best interest was being served by what they were trying to do. So somehow we all felt that, I think. And they gave us a strong sense of pride. I had teachers that would send students back home. When they came home in the morning and it appeared that you had not combed your hair or that shirt looked wrinkled or whatever, they would send them back home and say, tell your mom I said to give you a clean shirt, whatever. So those types of things we need to do for children, you know.
Where did you go when you left Indiana?
I went to Parker High School, A.H. Parker High School.
What was that like? Now, Parker has been touted as being the largest Negro school in the world. You leave Little Finley Elementary School, go to Parker High School. What was that transition like?
Well, I loved it. I have to say, I don't find too many environments that I don't enjoy, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was a great source of inspiration to be there. There were so many students there, and some of them were very accomplished students. The instructors there were just as caring and appeared to want me to be just as capable as Finley Avenue did. So, in fact, I was invited to participate in a lot of things that I chose not to. Oratorical, they tried for 4 years to get me to do that, and I just had personal reasons why I didn't want to, but when I came in the 9th grade, one of the first things I remember within the first 2 months, they had this Honor Society induction. And I remember I was so moved by it because we were in the auditorium and they had darkened the lights and it was very quiet. And then there was this very light procession and students marched in holding a candle. And it was a very humble, spiritual type ceremony. And they went up on the stage and they stood holding the candles, and then at some point somebody came out and read this announcement about how you qualified to be in it, and they said we were about to tap new students to be inducted. And those students, may have had some idea who they were, but they didn't know for sure. So it was really great to watch them go out into the audience and find a sister or a brother and take their hand, come on, you've earned this, come on, go with me, and they would hand them a candle. So one of my first determinations when I entered Parker, in the first 2 months, I decided that next year I would be one of those students being led up to the stage. And there were a lot of things to aspire to. That the environment was really wholesome. We had a lot of extracurricular activities, business club, teachers club, science club. Of course, there's the athletic things, the majorettes, and I think I may have been among one of the first female students to take the mechanical drawing class from Mr. Hawkins. They, at that time, girls didn't go over to the building where the band was, and Mr. Caswell and that group, but I convinced Mr. Hawkins that I needed to be in that class, and he went to bat on our behalf.
So you then, you really enjoyed your experience at Parker.
I loved the school. I loved it. Our principal, R.C. Johnson, whom we all called Big Red, looked big and mean, you know, and he'd see you in the hall, little mall. That was my maiden name. What are you doing in this hall? And do you have a pass? And I can remember a couple of times when I didn't have a pass but was allowed to escape. So that may be some of the preferential treatment you were talking about. But I did. I loved the school. I can't think of very many teachers at all. There were a couple of teachers that were liked less, and we tended to play tricks on them. But it wasn't a malicious type of thing, you know, and it wasn't an obvious show of dislike for them. We just sort of played a few tricks on them. But, it was a wonderful environment.
Now, 1961 was the year that the Freedom Riders came through. 1962 was the year that the Miles College students developed the selective buying campaign downtown. And of course, 1963 was the year of the demonstrations. Were you at all active in the demonstrations in '63? How did you get involved? What precipitated your involvement?
Something I saw on television. I was sitting at home one day, and you know, my parents had never really allowed us to ride the bus. There were a lot of things my parents didn't tell us. Rather than say you can't, they conveniently dropped us off or picked us up rather than have us get on a bus and have someone tell us that we couldn't ride or that we couldn't sit. So this particular day I was watching something on TV, and it was when some of these people had first come to town. And that's when I became aware of the signs that were on the seats that you moved
You
around.
said some of these people had just come to town. Who were you referring to?
Freedom Riders, I guess.
Okay.
People that had come to town to assist with the integration efforts. So I just sort of sat there and decided within myself. I didn't discuss it with anybody. I said, I'm going to ride this bus. I'm going to find out and see, and I'm not moving that sign. If I sit down, I'm going to stay there. I just started thinking these things in my head. So I had to have an excuse to go downtown. You know, I had to have permission. So I told my mom one day, I said, you know, I need to learn how to start taking care of bills and taking care of things. Don't you need me to pay this bill for you? And she had it accounted provision. So I said, let me go by and pay it, you know, and I made it appear to be an educational experience. So she said, okay, but you come right home. I said, I'm just going to pay the bill and then I'll come right home. And I did pay the bill. But when I got on the bus, probably fortunately, there wasn't enough people riding the bus that day for it to be an issue where I was sitting. And actually the bus driver seemed somewhat tolerant of a bus, because I think I probably got on the bus with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder and a look at him that sort of dared him to say anything to me about where I sat.
Were the boards still on the bus at
The
that
boards
time?
were there. In fact, there were people when I was sitting there that came up to the front of the bus and paid their money, but then went around to the second door to get on the bus, to board the bus. And I was trying to figure that out too, but that was one of those things where my parents didn't sit down and say, well, this is the way it is. So that was something that was a little bit surprising to me, that they would pay their money in the front and then walk around to the back door to get on the bus.
Although the bus was not crowded?
No. If there were white people sitting in the front, this is the way it appeared. If there was nobody in the front, white, they could pay their money and walk board the bus. But if there were whites sitting in the front, they paid their money and then walked back around to the second door and, you know, went straight to the back.
Right. So you sat in front of the board.
Yes.
Were there any reactions?
No.
No one?
No one reacted. The bus driver had a look. That's why I say I think he was somewhat tolerant. I think he suspected maybe what was going on in my mind. I probably had a look. But he did not say anything. And where I live from downtown, the number of bus stops between there and my home is probably about 6. So we're not talking about a lot of time, maybe 10 minutes.
No one in the back said anything.
No.
So you just defied the whole custom. And how did that make you feel?
Well, actually, I was a little nervous, a little afraid when I first boarded the bus. But, you know, as I sat there, I was trying to understand. I didn't have a good understanding of why it was this way.
You didn't ride the bus a lot, in other words.
No, I'm trying to think. The only other bus I really had ridden, we had a school bus that picked us up every morning to go to Parker High School, but it was called a special.
Right.
Right, and it was 10 cents to ride,
And you sat any place you wanted.
right, and it was just children like me, other school children. So I didn't have a real sense of what the social background and the historical aspects of why this was the way it was.
Do you remember what grades you were in?
9th grade.
You were in 9th grade, so this was wasn't around 61. Did you ever have any discussion with anybody about that experience? I mean, during that particular time with your friends, or did you ever tell your mother about it?
I didn't discuss very much. My father said no to everything, and I didn't give him an opportunity to tell me no for any of this. I didn't. They found out about most of what I had done after the fact. My mother was pretty much let my dad take the lead in the yes or the no's. But, and they were, I understood later why they were that, both of them taught school, they had 4 boys that they wanted to live to be a male adult. So a lot of what they did was done with the idea of protecting us. But I rarely discussed, my dad was very stern, very strict. And I rarely discussed, I was sort of one of those people that I would think about it and weigh it, and I'd make my own decision. I'm pretty much that way today. And if I decided to do it, it didn't matter if I was the only one doing it. I just made that decision. So that particular experience, along with hearing a lot of the motivational speeches at the church and just things that started happening during that time, was, I think, what sort of propelled me toward the movement. I personally felt very, very inspired and motivated when I would listen to the speeches at the church. Some of the things they would say about why we were doing the marching, what we were trying to accomplish. And it just seemed like for a certain select group of Black people, there was a higher goal. And that maybe it was the same higher goal for my parents, but they couldn't accomplish it in the same way as these people. And so I wanted to be part of that. It was just, it felt exciting, it felt good, it felt right, and I wanted to be part of that. So I felt like pretty much if I discussed it at home, that they were going to tell me no. So I didn't.
Were you all members of 16th Street?
We've been at 16th Street since I was 2. We moved to Birmingham, and my mom joined that church immediately.
What then was the first time that you remember being involved in the movement? You know, in April and May of '63 is when the demonstrations took place. Were you actively involved prior to then, about attending meetings, the mass meetings, or when did you get involved?
I attended as many mass meetings as I could. I just loved the atmosphere.
Starting when, though?
Starting probably in terms of what year or...
Right. Was it during the demonstrations or before the demonstrations of '63?
Well, I think what happened with me doing the clerical work, since grade 8,
Oh, okay.
I was there and I was aware a lot of times of things that would be going on. Plus I worked in the summer. You know, when school was out, I would go there and stay all day in the summer, answer the phones and do different things. So I became aware of people coming in out of our church. I became aware of things that were being planned, the meetings, the speeches. It was commonplace to see some of these people come through. And so I became very accustomed, very comfortable with talking with these people, and I just found it inspiring. You know, I really liked being around them because, again, it appeared that they had a message, a higher goal, which was beyond. My dad's message was education, okay, which was the same message we got in school. And of course, most students don't see the importance of that quite the way they should at that age. But maybe it was because of what we could feel when you went to these meetings and they sang the songs and they gave the speeches and even gave you an opportunity to stand and say or ask questions if you needed to. It made you feel part of it. the singing was just motivational. It just made you ready to do something. And
So you were there, were your brothers involved at the same level that you were, any of your siblings? What about your parents, were they involved?
my two younger brothers were in the church when it was bombed, and aside from that, I may have been the Lone Ranger as far as, but I was always told that I was the stubborn one in the house, and, you know, I was the one that had a mind of their own.
Well, you attended the mass meetings.
Yes.
How would you describe a mass meeting?
Well, they were always very crowded, always a lot of people there, a lot of, and I don't remember, when I say people, more people, adults than students, but I just remember there were always a lot of people. I remember quite a few students, but I don't remember numbers. I remember that they would start with, usually a song of some sort, then we would get a prayer. Had occasion to hear Dr. King speak many times, had occasion to hear Jesse Jackson speak, Bevel out of Nashville, I think.
Right.
And a couple of other people probably that I can't put a name with their face right now. Reverend Abernathy, I remember being present. Dr. King was usually saved for last. The younger speakers, Bevel and Jackson, sort of helped kind of get people in and grouped, and them, along with maybe some of the females that really had nice voices, would start the singing and kind of get people revved up and ready to receive whatever he had to say. And then we got kind of an instructional pep talk. I remember hearing things like, if you have anything on your person, even a fingernail file, a pencil, you know, they would pass these huge waste baskets and tell you to drop anything like that in so that there would be no perception that you were attempting to attack anyone.
This is
prior to the marches.
Right.
Right. And when they were convinced, and they would even come back a second time and say, now, we have to trust you on your honor, but now make sure that you've given us, you know, anything that you have in your pocket. At that time, it was common too for the high school boys to have the little pocket knives. You could get them very cheaply. So usually on the second go round, you would still pick up a few more things in that big waste basket. And
How did you get back and forth between the church and the meetings in the evenings?
now where I live, where my mom still lives, from the church is probably 7 or 8 minutes. My mom dropped me off a lot, primarily again because I was working at the church. But there were also several people from my church, Reverend Oden, who was the assistant pastor for a long time, Reverend Milton Stolenworth, who was over there in that neighborhood for different occasions, and so I was always kind of hauling a ride with somebody too. On the street behind me, Reverend Deacon Finch, Mr. Lowe came by a couple of times and got me. I would find rides with people when she wasn't available to take me. We had initially just one car in my family, and when my dad worked the second job at night, she was there without a car. So as long as I told her that Reverend Oden or some of these people were picking me up, she didn't have a problem with it. So if she wasn't dropping me off, I was riding with someone like that.
Do you remember the first demonstration that you took part in, the first mass demonstration?
I remember the first one where we walked from Parker High School and we didn't get very far. We got to 8th Avenue. There used to be an Atlantic Mills Thrift Center there. And we were stopped at that point and told that we could not go any further. Well, we told ordered to disperse. They had the foghorns. And we sort of scattered. We ended up, all of us at the church, but we sort of scattered. The goal was City Hall. There were a couple of times when the goal was for everybody to end up at City Hall to have a mass rally, but I know there were at least 2 occasions when we did. Well, I don't ever remember getting to City Hall, but the point, I guess what I call the climax or the ultimate march for me was the one that ended in Kelly Ingram Park on the occasion when we got as far as the park and they had brought out the little white tanks.
Before you talk about that,
Okay.
tell me, how did you amass the people, the students at Parker, when you left Parker? How did that all transpire?
Okay. We were given instruction, or it was agreed at the rallies that were held at the church, that someone would come to the school when it was time for the students to leave. And they gave us an approximate time, and it seems to me they may have said 11 o'clock, roughly 11:30. And it seems that the point at which we did see someone out waving, saying it's time to go, was around 11:15 or so. Parker had a gate entrance to the street, and the gate had a chain, but it was enough gap in between that gate that you could squeeze through with no problem. So when we got the signal that it was time to go, most of us just squeezed through the gate. However, there were a lot of students that walked out the front doors, and many teachers just did not see them. Or I don't know if Mr. Johnson saw them, but he didn't indicate that he had seen them. So we were ready. We were waiting for a sign or a person to let us know when it was time, and we got the signal.
Now, you were a sophomore or junior, either sophomore or junior in '63.
Sophomore.
Sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
And you were a good student.
Yes.
Were there any questions by anybody about your being involved? Because that could, in fact, impact upon on your studies. Did that ever come up? Is that ever an issue?
The school?
As far as the school is concerned, teachers, all your parents?
I was pretty much a straight A student. When I graduated from Parker High School, there were 437 children in my graduating class, and I was number 7 out of 437. I love school, love to study, love to read, and actually found this, I guess this was, I always had, I can't exactly describe it, but I always had kind of like some type of inner calling. I just, a person that responded to unkindness, and not necessarily on this scale, but anytime I saw things that I didn't think were right or were unkind, I would say something. So this type of movement, I think, appealed to something that was already there. And I think I had, when I was a young girl, I used to spend summers with my grandfather, who was a minister in Clanton. He and my grandmother traveled around all summer, 2 weeks at every church there to do vacation Bible school. And I sort of assisted in organizing the programs in the Bible school. And so I think I had already a sense of a missionary type attitude. And I had a lot of confidence because they allowed me to speak for myself and to represent myself and to represent them. And when I was at the church, having been the secretary that long, I was also allowed to put in positions of authority, at the church. I represented us on many occasions on trips away from the church in Oklahoma and New York and National Baptist Convention. So there was just a type of confidence that came from talking publicly to the church people. And I'm sure there were occasions when what I said may not have been the best, but they never told you, oh, this was wonderful. They always made you feel that it was very special what you had done. So I think my grandfather was one of the first people that convinced me. Probably that was his job as a grandfather, but he just always made me feel that I was very special, and that I always needed to speak up if I didn't agree with something. And they gave me freedom to do that. And my parents actually gave us the freedom if we didn't agree with what they said. It didn't mean they would change.
So you were the most outgoing of your siblings?
I think so, yeah.
Tell me a bit about the occurrence of the demonstration downtown in Cathedral Park, which was about what you mentioned.
That was my last demonstration. On the day that we marched to the park, that was I think we still came, we always took that 8th Avenue route. And I'm trying to remember, it seems that maybe it's 14th Street where we turned right. We had a route, they had mapped out a route for us. And of all the things that they had told us in the church, these motivational speeches and do this and don't do this, they had not told us about water hoses, but they had told us about dogs. If the policeman attempts to do this with the dogs, what are you going to do? And they would even have little role plays where you could see what to do and what not to do. They said if a policeman spit on you, if he slapped you, this is how you respond to that. They didn't talk about the tanks. They didn't talk about the water hoses. And I suspect that maybe those things were a surprise on the day that we marched. It's what I was thinking that maybe later. I said, well, they didn't tell us about this. And I said, maybe they didn't know. Later I said, maybe they didn't know. But the water hoses hurt a lot.
You actually hit with
I was hit with a water hose on this side, running from the water. And I had a sweater, navy blue sweater on, I won't forget. Tore a big hole in my sweater and sort of just swiped part of my hair off on that side. But I just remember the sting and the pain on my face. I've never been hit with a whip, but somehow I want to liken it to being hit with a whip. It was very painful. And you couldn't escape. There were a few points at which we were trying to stand up and hold on to a wall, those buildings that were there at the time. And it was just a terrific pain from the force, which I later learned was something like 100 pounds of force per minute. But that was the point at which I think I started rethinking, do I really want to be part of this, or do I have what it takes to continue on this level?
Right.
And I think I made the decision then that perhaps I would offer my contributions in another way. I would assist in some other ways. I honestly was afraid of the dogs. Did not like being wet up. I felt very disrespected when I was wet up with the water and just my hair, and we were just marching,
Did you go back to the church after that happened? Were you arrested?
I was not arrested. No, I was not one of those that was arrested. I went back to the church briefly. Remember going in the ladies' room to just sort of try to dry off a little bit, and ended up getting a ride with someone, got home. And, when my mom walked in the door, she knew something was different, but she didn't know what I had done. And so I explained to her where I had been and what I had done. At that point, I was actually proud of what I had done, but I had some question marks there about the tactics they were using. Because I think I felt that you could actually be hurt. Serious things could happen with what they were doing.
I had not thought about that prior to that.
Right, and she made my dad aware of it, and he was very angry. He was very angry that I had done this. And
With you?
He was angry with me, and instructed me not to go back. And just talked about these people were crazy. You might expect anything to happen. They probably would stop at nothing to keep things the way they were. And just felt like, well, if it's going to be change, you let somebody else make the change. You stay out of it. That's never been my way. So.
So were you ever involved in demonstrations again after that?
Not marching, no.
This, of course, what had happened was that they had given out of bodies, in effect. And the children were really the saving grace for the movement. Did you have any concept of that at the time, that the children were actually saving the movement, and the whole idea of filling up jails, what that meant? Did you ever have a real concept of that at that particular point?
I don't think I understood the real significance of why they were using the students. I like to refer to us as valuable commodities to them at that time. I came to know later the rationale behind why they used us, but I have to say that in terms of my participation, I felt very much a part of what was going on. I felt that I was needed. I felt, when I heard what they had to say, I responded to that spiritually. I agreed spiritually with what they were trying to do and was glad that I could be a part of it. So I think most of the children felt that this was a worthy cause. This was something we needed to do, we wanted to be part of, and we had confidence in the leadership. We had confidence in Dr. King and James Bevel, and the ones that spoke, they were very charismatic, but they were also very articulate. They were very specific. When you would see them, they would shake your hand, young man, young lady, give you a hug. We appreciate the fact that you're here. And we felt very much included. I did, and I think most of the students did. So I think most of us probably didn't have the real sense of how valuable we were, but we felt good that we could make a contribution in this small way. They needed numbers, we helped them with the numbers.
You were never arrested.
No.
When you returned to school, what was the reception like?
There was a lot of hugging and laughing and talking about what had happened and describing and jokes about how someone's hair looked after they got wet and who they saw running in this direction. There were a couple of students that I knew that went to jail that were out the next day, but there were others that stayed in jail 4 or 5 days. So like the next day or two, we heard accounts from those students of what it was like. And for the most part, it was funny. You know, yeah, they served us these peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and they were fingerprinted, and they went on to tell, you know, they were carried away in the wagon and then fingerprinted and so forth. But the accounts that came from the students that stayed 4 or 5 days were not quite as comical. The ladies had a lot of stories of being, I guess, mistreated, not abused necessarily, but just mistreated. I think they were taken out to Fair Park and crowded into this area. I remember several of the ladies, in fact, one lady gave this account, when the Institute first opened and we did that program across the street, one lady gave this account of needing personal articles. She was there 4 or 5 days and no one attended to her needs, and she felt very deprived, disrespected. I mean, you know, and she cried when she gave this account, and this was like 20, 25 years later, so I know it must have really affected her. But I think the guys were able to tough it out a little better than the ladies were, the girls were. And
Were there any discussions of this in the classrooms after you returned to school?
the discussions that we had were about the food. There were jokes about the food.
In the classroom, I mean, with the teacher?
Not with the teacher, I was just talking among the students. I don't remember us actually having any discussions with our teachers about what went on. I think the teachers had to kind of know and not know. I think they were proud of us, but they had the business as usual type attitude. But we did a lot of talking at lunchtime, or sometimes we had study periods. The teacher might not be in the room, and we would discuss it among ourselves in the library and just sort of compare notes on what had happened to different people.
Do you remember what you were doing when the March on Washington took place? Were you
Watching it
involved?
on television.
Did you have any desire to go? Was that an option at the time?
I don't know of any way that I could have gotten permission or whatever to go to Washington. I really don't. I would love to have gone. I sat glued to my set. And of course, like everyone else, thought that Dr. King's speech was just marvelous. It was just moving. And I was so proud of us as a group of people. When I saw how we had assembled there, and I looked at the people that were representing us, representing me, and I listened to them, and I was just very, very proud. And you know, I guess I've always had that sense of pride because all of the teachers I had in elementary school were wonderful, and all of my high school teachers were wonderful. So where was this inferiority that I kept hearing about? That we couldn't make the grade, that we couldn't perform as well as they could, and I could never find what they were talking about. I kept searching for what they were talking about, and I was just extremely proud. I remember that, and still felt very committed, even though I was in front of the television set.
September 15th, 1963. 16th Street. Tell me what that morning was like. You were home, you get ready for Sunday school, get ready to go to church. Tell me, what do you remember about what took place just prior to the fiasco?
Okay. I I always left home fairly early. My dad worked his second job on Sunday, so he would drop us off as he went to work. And my sister, normally I took my sister to Sunday school with me, and my two younger brothers. She wouldn't let me comb her hair that morning. And I kind of didn't feel like wanting to take her anyway, so I told my mother, I said, she won't let me comb her hair. And she said, okay, just go on without her. So I took my brothers, and my dad dropped us off, and he was headed toward Mountain Brook. And I assumed my duties as secretary. I was actually, had come through the downstairs area to pass out the cards, the attendance cards and the little envelopes where you record your money. And had done that and was headed back up the stairs, saw the girls in the bathroom sort of laughing and talking and putting on their robes. They were excited. Actually, everybody was in Sunday school class, which is probably where they should have been, but they were excited. So I walked up the steps. We had two sets, well, we still do sets of steps, but then walked up the second set of steps and had stepped out. Before I stepped out into the sanctuary, we used to have the church office right there on the right. Used to be a Reverend Hamlin study, but now at that time it was the actual church office. And the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and someone said 2 minutes. And Reverend Cross had not made us aware, or maybe he had made some of the adults aware, but he had not made a general announcement to the church that we had bonfires. So I didn't know, didn't even think about what this might mean.
What was your response?
Well, they hung up. They hung up. They just said that and clicked.
Then what did you do?
And I was just standing there and kind of thought about it, hung the phone up, stepped out into the sanctuary because I had about 3 or 4 more classes that I needed to give these cards to. And as soon as I stepped out into the sanctuary, it wasn't 2 minutes, it was probably more like 5 seconds. Time it takes to walk from that office out, maybe 5 or 6 seconds. Something happened at that time. I didn't know that the church had been bombed, but I felt what I heard sounded at first like a rumble, like thunder. And I remember thinking rain immediately came to my mind, but as soon as I thought rain, all of the windows started shattering, glass came pouring in. And when that happened, I heard screams, all upstairs screams. And then somebody said, hit the floor, or get on the floor. And we all got on the floor and very quiet for what seemed like several minutes, but it probably was only 20 or 30 seconds. And then we heard footsteps. At that point, somebody got up and started running, and whoever it was, everybody else followed. So I came out of the church through the back.
So you came out of the church after getting up off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Did you walk? Did you run?
I ran
To the back.
to the back of the church, and we went out through those doors where you normally enter on Sunday for the 11 o'clock service. Came down the steps, and my first thoughts immediately were to find my 2 younger brothers. And I could see that something had happened, and I think I learned in that first minute or 2 that I was out there that our church had been bombed. And everybody was looking for somebody, I think. And I was looking for my 2 younger brothers, couldn't find them. But they were in Sunday school classes downstairs. So I went back downstairs, and I remember going into the boys' bathroom first because I looked in all of the classrooms and I couldn't find them. And I went in the boys' bathroom and I didn't see them in there. And then I started into the girls' bathroom and I said, well, if they went into the bathroom, they probably wouldn't be in here. But then they might, because they were little boys and they were like 7 and 5, and so maybe they ran this way. Or maybe they just didn't know where they were running. So I spent, it's a part that I don't like to talk about too much, but I spent a lot of time in the basement looking for them. And
there were other people looking for other folk
other
as
people.
well. Right?
Mm-hmm. I never found them. I can tell you that I spent a lot of time in that basement, but my baby brother was found on 8th Avenue. He had jumped out of one of those side windows when it broke and just started running. And I guess with no real sense of where he was running, but just he knew he needed to get out of there and he just ran. And my mom, someone called her at home to tell her they had bombed the church. And when she was headed to the church to check on us, was when she encountered my baby brother. She was coming and he was coming, and that's when she found him. My dad found my oldest brother downtown. I guess a lot of the kids just ran, they just scattered.
Now, your father was headed, you said, to Mountain Brook.
To Mountain Brook. He worked at the Birmingham Country Club, which was a club we still can't attend today. I have membership in, but he was a waiter there, and he heard the explosion. And he said, when he had the radio on, my dad was a great listener of talk shows even back then, and whoever he was listening to announced within the next minute or two that the church had been bombed. And he said he turned around, he never got to work, he turned around and came right back, and he was also looking for us. He encountered my 7-year-old brother somewhere in that. By the time my dad got back, they had blocked off a big portion of the area that surrounded the church. So somewhere on the boundaries of trying to get past those boundaries, my dad encountered my brother. And he took his hand and came within the boundaries looking for my other brother and myself. He found me, but my mom found my other brother, at other points. So,
At what point did you know that the children had died? Yeah.
I knew that there were people hurt. I didn't at first because there was a guy that was outside saying that there were people hurt inside in there. But I had been in there looking for my brothers and I didn't see anybody. And so I remember thinking that he was just trying to kind of create a little more excitement or something. And I was angry because I felt like, I said, well, why is he saying this, And then I got upset because I thought, well, did he see my brothers and I didn't? So I kept going back. At that point, I still didn't know where they were. And I spent a lot of time, for some reason, going back to that girl's bathroom because I just kept thinking, maybe because the boys' bathroom was not shattered. You could actually go in there. I mean, it was there. You could tell there was damage, but you could actually walk around and see that. Okay, here's the hand bowl and here's the toilet and whatever. And obviously, no one here. But in the case of the girls' bathroom, you couldn't see that. You didn't know what you were looking at, but you couldn't see that they were there or that they weren't there, that no one was hurt. And I was at home. By the time that I was home, I remember I had been home about an hour, and Alpha Robinson called our house, and she asked me, did I see Carol? And I said no. And she asked to speak with my mom and just asked if she had seen her, and she said no. And she said, well, maybe my Carol is all right. Your Carol's at home, so maybe my Carol is all right too. And
did you know all 4 girls?
yes. Cynthia Wesley and I were in a little social club together, Cavalettes. There was a male social club, Cavaliers, and they adopted us or something. But anyway, we coined the name Cavalettes, and we were in this club together. And it was just something where we had parties at each other's homes. We had purchased T-shirts with our names and the club, Big C on it. We had purchased hats and so forth. In fact, we made those purchases, we ordered those things, John Singleton, when it was still open, right before the church was bombed. And those items that she had ordered, we took to her mother's house probably about 2 weeks after the church was bombed. Denise I knew well, didn't spend a lot of time with Denise. She was a lot younger than I was, but I knew her. And I always thought she was a very happy, delightful child, around the church. She was very pleasant to be around. Addie was very quiet. Addie was in my Sunday school class. And I think, I always think of them, earlier you asked a question about preferential treatment. I think a lot of how a person feels or what they think they see is how they feel about themselves. And I always felt like Addie was one of those persons maybe that didn't feel very good about herself. She was not a very attractive girl, but she was very quiet, very mannerable, and just, you know, in our Sunday school class, but just didn't have a lot to say. And we knew that that was a large family of them, that they would come in and we all talked and played together. But I think there was probably more troubling her than we knew at that time. And I say that based on conversations I had with her sister, oldest sister, Junie. And, but I think, you know, with a lot of people that weren't totally comfortable with themselves, that there may have been the perception. And I think there was definitely that perception with them, that they were different.
You being secretary in the church, how did this event impact upon you going back into the church? Not just for services, but for whatever else you may have been doing extracurricular.
Initially, I was very hurt. I was shocked. I was afraid.
Were you actually afraid to go to the church?
I was afraid, and the reason I was afraid was earlier that year, the Crowell's house had been bombed. And that house had destroyed the front of our, pretty much, well, the foundation in the front of our house. I had 4 brothers, we had 2 sets of bunk beds, and the boys that were sleeping on the top were actually thrown out of those beds when her house was bombed. This was a bomb that went off about 3 in the morning. And I can't explain to you what it does to you to be awakened that time of morning. To what, you know, we heard this terrible, terrible noise. There was a building, a big cement building, J.M. Tull, on the street behind us. And what the policeman said was that the bomb exploded, hit the building and bounced back, which was why we had so much damage. But when the bomb exploded, it was like everything lit up. It was daylight for what seemed like maybe 30 seconds. It was probably about 5 seconds. And then it went black again. Then you heard screaming, you know, people coming out of their homes. And I could hear Mrs. Crowell inside my home. I could hear her screaming coming outside of her home. Mr. Crowell didn't wake up. He wasn't hurt, but he didn't wake up. And she was trying to wake him up from the outside, calling his name. And my younger brother just developed a tremendous nervous condition, you know, having been thrown out of his bunk bed like that. So when this church explosion occurred, I think I decided that it was probably just a matter of time. You know, that had such an impact, both of those. And I think I decided that I was probably going to, sooner or later, I was going to be killed by one of these bombs. And I think it had a lot of effects on me. I mean, I was afraid, I was frightened, not afraid to be part of things or for what I had done, but just, it seemed that there was no control, there was no way to stop what they were doing. There was no way to protect yourself.
Felt helpless.
Yes.
And just in your everyday life, this is what you viewed. What you described is really a helplessness, that you had no control even over yourself because of the exterior forces.
Exactly. That's exactly what I felt. And I was so withdrawn after that church bombing. I didn't attend the funeral of the 4 girls. I remember Mrs. Robertson calling, and they were asking for some of us to be flower bearers at the funerals. And I told my mom, I said, please don't make me go. You know, I thought that I would probably, I'm not sure what I thought I would see. I knew I was really hurting inside and grieving that my friends were gone. But I just did not want to be, I didn't want to see them, I didn't want to be there, part of that. And so she kept trying to encourage me to go. And finally, I remember the day of the funeral, she called and said, well, I think I'll let her stay here. And I didn't attend the funeral. I just couldn't.
Do you remember when you went back to school, what was the atmosphere like?
Very somber. We had teachers that did allow us, you asked that question earlier and I said no. I thought about Ralph Joseph, who was a math teacher at that time that I had. And I remember that he allowed us, and Mr. Winston, can't think of his first name, but big tall Mr. Wimp. And I remember that they asked a few questions and listened to what we had to say, so it was good, it felt good to hear.
So therapeutic.
Right, very therapeutic. And I remember even when the president was killed that year, that Mr. Joseph was the one, I was in his class when he made the announcement that it was official, the school had gotten word that the president had been shot. And he walked around the classroom for a little bit, looked out the window, and then he came back up front, closed the textbook. And everybody, a few students were crying, you know, and he allowed us to talk then or to just say what was on our mind. So it was difficult. That was another one of those situations where you felt that you had no control over what might happen tomorrow, what had already happened today. And we didn't even have a sense of two things. Today, when things like this happen, you bring in all the therapists and the psychologists and students get a chance to talk and really get it out of their system. There was no sense of that, nor was there any sense of justice. These things had happened, it was accepted, it may happen to you tomorrow, no one was in jail, and nobody even mentioned that no one was in jail. So it was almost as if it was just a type of predestination that you couldn't do anything about. And I think that may have worried me more than a lot of other things.
You seem to have been a person that was always in control
Mhm.
of yourself.
Mhm.
And you had lost that.
Mhm.
And of course, that would be traumatic, particularly under the circumstances.
It shook my confidence. I was always a very confident person. And when I graduated from Parker and went to school, it was like a refreshing change. Wonderful college environment at Fisk University, and among the students and the professors, and we got a chance to talk, and occasionally I would have flashbacks, or I would have troubling moments, and I took those opportunities to write. I have a big box of stuff that I would write periodically, and I think the writing was therapeutic too. I think it was a way to put on paper some of the pain that I felt, and when I read some of that stuff now, I almost can't stand to read it because I can see that it was really painful what I was feeling. And I don't like to read those things now about myself, but
Have you ever thought of publishing?
no, I've been asked to.
Will you ever?
You know, I don't know. Even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, was approached about putting some of this information in book form. There are a lot of things that I haven't shared with you that happened during my childhood that don't necessarily relate to this, but they are things that helped or shaped me into what I am today, whatever that is. But and the poetry was certainly a big part of it. Poetry, writings, whatever, it was just my way of getting it out of my system. We didn't have, you know, I had people I could talk to, but if they weren't people that had been part of that, they didn't really understand what you were trying to say. I mean, they couldn't relate to it. And a lot of the students that I went to school with lived in California and New York. Judge Wade McCree had daughters there, and Attorney General Riley Branton, J.O. Patterson, International Bishop. Those were the types of students that were at the school. So a lot of them either lived in a very protected environment or they lived in big cities where the racism wasn't quite as
Northern cities.
northern cities, where the racism wasn't quite as blatant as it was down south. So a lot of it, I think I sorted out in my head and tossed it around and came up with my own deductions and theories. And you know, eventually I was able to, I think, to put it in perspective. And I think once I was able to really grab hold of it and and straighten myself up, it was like, okay, now I see what's what.
Did you enjoy Fisk as much as you did Parker?
I loved Fisk. Yes, I told you, there's not very many environments that I don't enjoy. But the wonderful environment of learning, it was my first experience with white instructors. And they were very congenial, just part of the campus. You know, everybody in jeans and sweatshirts or whatever. There were occasions when we dressed differently, but for the most part, there were a lot of learning about other cultures and what blacks in other cities were doing. A lot of Black history taught during that time. Dante and John Killens were some of the artists in residence during the time that I was there. I think of a couple of other names that you would probably recognize, but regular visitors to my campus were people like Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, the guy that was married to Miriam Makeba. We had an African group that came over that brought African dancers that actually danced in their native outfits, and they were
Stokely Carmichael?
yes, that's. This was a constant part of the life there, and everybody that came had a very positive message, a very motivational message, and it was like, hey, I know you guys are here learning, getting ready to step out into the world, and we're waiting on you. We need some more help out here, and so they were very, very motivational, and that's the one thing I think I didn't see during that era, blacks bickering among themselves. I didn't see blacks pointing fingers or disagreeing as much with methodologies or your way or mine.
Well, that period, from 65 to 69, was probably 4 of the most volatile years of the 20th century, because there are a lot of things that were happening. Of course, the civil rights movement had escalated, become more aggressive. You had the development of the Black Panther Party. You had the various rebellions in the streets of various cities, Detroit,
Nashville.
You had the Black Power conferences. You had Stokely to talk about Black Power. Black Power became the symbol. How did all of that play on your campus at Fisk?
All of that was very well. When he came around, he was well received. I remember there were sit-ins going in downtown in Nashville, and I believe, if I remember right, Diane Nash Bevel was part of that. And by the time that I came to Fisk as a freshman and a sophomore, not knowing much about Nashville, and I was a little bit more reserved in terms of stepping out in that manner. During the time that I was at Fisk was also when Dr. King was killed. So I remember that day real quiet over the campus, but pretty much we always knew any new person that was involved in the movement, or if there was another spokesperson, or any messages that were out there pretty much came to our campus. We were all very much a part of whatever we could do. We didn't march, we assisted with making signs. And I'm trying to think, it seems that we donated money even in some cases. What little change we had wasn't a lot, but we sometimes would take up money and send what we had. I remember also across the street from Fisk, there were several black businesses, a Colliers Cleaners, a bookstore, and Odie's Quick Mart. And those people, we did volunteer work during some of the demonstrations that were going on in Nashville. We came in and assisted as far as helping them stay open if they needed to leave, or just to be there to protect things. But we were a fairly protected area anyway, just because we're a college campus.
College area.
Yeah, they tended to have more security.
Fisk,
Tennessee State.
What did you do after Fisk?
When I left Fisk, I was in Birmingham. I came back to Birmingham. I married my junior year at Fisk. My husband
He was at Fisk?
had graduated from Fisk. He came back he was in the Air Force, and came back during the month of January. We married, and then he went back to the Air Force, and by the time I graduated from Fisk, we had been married exactly a year and 9 months, and I was pregnant with my daughter when I graduated. So she was born, graduated in May, she stayed with my mother. She was born in September, and a couple of months after that, he was shipped out to Korea. So I spent the next year and a half with my mother, and I taught school at Carver High School in North Birmingham, and took care of my daughter. When he came back from Korea, he accepted a management position with Sears, and we moved to Florida. So we lived in Orlando for about 3 years. And in fact, when I moved to Orlando, Walt Disney World had been open 2 weeks. And I have some of the original maps and the $3.50 ticket that they used to sell when they first opened, and a lot of little memorabilia there. But we used to make a lot of trips to Disney World because we were about 15 minutes from there and had a lot of relatives that came to town. But we lived there 3 years. I taught school there, Oak Ridge High School. And my second daughter was born there. And after 3 years there, he was transferred to Atlanta. So I spent about 2.5 years in Atlanta, and I did not work. In fact, I went out and applied for a job and received a job offer with the Atlanta Board of Education. And the day that I came home to tell him about that, he was waiting to tell me that he had been transferred again to a little place called Warner Robins, Georgia. And we spent, at that time, had the reputation for the safest city in the United States. So we spent about 2 years there. While we were there, they attempted to transfer him to Chicago. And he said, no, I'm not moving to Chicago. You know, he just said, well, I'll just look for another job. And so they decided to give him another option, and the other option ended up being Birmingham. So we ended up moving back to Birmingham. That's kind of how we got back here. And when we moved back, we moved, out where we are now. That's where we've been.
If there's a movement going on today and your children were the age that you were when you participated in the demonstrations, would you allow them to participate?
I would very much like for my children to be part of any movement that affects us as a race of people. However, I would like to make sure that they have the right perspective on what they're doing, why they're doing it. And, since that time, while I do believe that there are very basic freedoms that many of our people are denied or just don't have access to, I have since developed just some philosophies of my own. I watch our people in life, daily activities, and there are a lot of things that we used to be very conscientious about that we are not now. We used to be very prudent with our money and our property and so forth, and we became very casual about that, and we've lost a lot of it. We used to be very conscientious about teaching our children, not just right from wrong, integrity and character. We insisted that they perform in school. We insisted that they represent us a certain way, in a certain manner when they were in public. And we have, we somewhere dropped the ball. We don't insist on a lot of the things that we used to. I also have sort of developed the perspective that a lot of the war we fight right now is an economic war. And that we can't just do it with marching. A lot of what we do has to be from the perspective that we understand that, people don't just treat you right because it's the right thing to do, or people don't just respect you because it's the right thing to do. We first have to respect ourselves, and there's a lot of takes that we could make on that, but we first have to fully respect ourselves and our families. But one of the ways that I respect my family is I make sure that my family has a roof over their head, and food, and clothing, and that they go to school and they understand the importance of that. And I attend their meetings. I don't have children this age anymore, but I attend the PTA meetings, and I'm part of what's going on. I'm part of the decisions that affect my children. I show my support, my responsibility. I set the right example by doing these things. There are a lot of things that we can do that no one else can control. You know, whites don't control how much time you spend with your son. If you play ball with him, if you take him to the library, or just have the father-son walks and talks, those are things that are within your control. And I suspect that that's where the real confidence and the real integrity and character is built. And we don't do much of that anymore. I taught with a lot of children, and for example, when we did the town hall meeting over at Birmingham Southern, remember the students that kept asking questions from Homewood? Those students have been in contact with me since that program. And they wanted someone to talk to. First of all, just to acknowledge that they understood the types of problems that they were having at Homewood. And I certainly understood because my children had followed in similar footsteps when they were in school. So I certainly understood what they were talking about. Now, where do we draw the line? You're a child, sort of, you're a student, but you're considered a child. And these are adults that are playing these games with you. So without going against the wishes of your parents, if the parents are involved to that extent, in a lot of cases they appear not to be. So what kind of advice can I give these young people to keep them motivated, to not make them feel that there's something wrong with them, because they recognize the differences being made, they recognize the right and the wrongs of the issues. So how do we continue to fight, stay focused, but not lose it to emotion while this stuff is going on? I like to take on those types of struggles. I think that the most important investment we can make is with our children, whether that be teaching them those types of things, whether that be teaching them. I like to teach. I did corporate income taxes for 10 years, so all of my two daughters' friends would come around and Ms. McKinstry, will you do my income tax? And I did income taxes for years, never charged them anything. But then I thought how much better it would be if you can do your own. I mean, how good do we feel? The more we can do for ourselves, right, the more better we feel. So I started just teaching them and sharing information about finances and stocks and investments. And, you know, this is your ultimate weapon. You know, to position yourself in such a way that you're not beholden to anyone. So that when you're on this job later, or wherever you are later, you don't have to accept less than what you think is due you, or less than what your character dictates because you need the check, or because you have allowed yourself to get in a position where this man is controlling how you eat, how you buy, etc. So I like to have those kinds of conversations. I like to take us to an economic realm, and I think that may have been more of what Jesse Jackson was focusing on during Martin Luther King's era, which probably was a little bit ahead of its time, is how I like to say it, but it's something I think that's very much needed. You know, our children graduate now, they can't balance the checkbook, have no concept of monies and so forth. So all of it's important. I mean, that part is important, but you know, hopefully the character and the integrity and the striving for academic excellence that foundation has been laid, grades hopefully 1 through 12. And then somewhere in those last senior years, we focus on the real energies on how do I establish myself in such a way that I can support myself and assist other people, support my people, give back to my people. And you really have to think about that, and you have to be very focused and prudent with your decisions and your finances. But so I have a special interest in finances. And I try to pass that along. What I also see working in the corporate environment is a new trend now where companies are sourcing or contracting out a lot of the employees. So employees will not get an opportunity to build the 10, 20, 30-year tenures like our parents did, which means they also will not be able to build that automatic retirement anymore. Whatever retirement you have to build it yourself. You'll have to do it on your own. So I've spent a little time in just researching the best ways to do that, how to maximize this 5 years I spent with this company, and then as I move on to somewhere else, how do I maximize that? So that somewhere down the road, I am comfortable and secure, but I have a retirement also, you know. And it's not about money, it's about being able to take care of yourself. not being beholden to anybody. It makes a big difference. I tell the young ladies, it makes a big difference if you're working a job, well, the young men too, but if you have a job and you don't owe anybody, and you've got, let's just say $10,000 or $20,000 in the bank, it makes a lot of difference how you handle yourself when that person comes to you and you recognize very clearly that what they're saying is out of line and out of place. In whatever vein it is. I mean, sometimes it's sexual harassment, sometimes it's other things, but whatever it is, you can recognize and speak to it in the manner that you feel is appropriate, and you don't have to bend, because you know that this person in effect does pay your salary, but you have taken the time to position yourself so that if I have to pay my own, I can.
He's not totally in control of your life.
Exactly, most definitely. So I like to see our children start thinking along that line. I'd like to see us think less about color issues. Some of the things that we say as far as how whites perceive us is their problem and it's not ours. And that's where we have to leave it with them. Either they work it out in their minds or they don't. But it has no effect on where I go, on how I strive. And I just like to see our children focus on themselves. And I think the greatness that I saw, at least I thought it was great growing up in elementary school and high school, and even now to reflect on R.C. Johnson, whose daughters, Alma subsequently became the wife of Colin Powell. I mean, when we look back, we have a very rich history, no matter where you happen to have been. Parker was a big school, but it wasn't considered a school of the elite or anything. Everybody there that wanted opportunities got them. I mean, they fought for everybody. If you were a good C student and you wanted to go to college, somebody was going to try to help you go, you know. So I think that we're still in that business, a lot of us. What I find that our children need more than anything now is just a lot of motivation, a lot of encouragement, and a strong sense of being capable. I think that was my greatest asset, just feeling that I was capable. Somebody convinced me that I was, and I don't know at what point I believed that, but it makes a big difference in how you approach things. So I definitely think there's some new strategies that we need to take with our children. Now, the other side of that is I get a lot of calls from high schools, and I think it's equally important for those children to be aware of where we come from and where we need to go. And so I spend just as much time talking with them about the things that went on when I was growing up. And I like to use Oprah's statement when we did the show with her. At the end of the program, she said, what you have to remember is that these people are not dead. All of these things that you read about now and that you're hearing about 16th Street and the marches and the keep back and forth on television, a lot of these people, most of them are still around. We are not dead. And we're still remembering, and it's still painful. So be careful, you know. I need to see you represent yourself in such a way that tells me you're sensitive to what happened, that you appreciate that we went through this era, but that you also understand that we don't need to repeat this. And so I talk with them too, because I think somebody has to talk to our children and to their children. But a lot of the things that our parents, our black parents, are not telling our children is a lot of what we have to, all of us have to sort of just reach down and pick up the slack, because we've lost a lot of ground, particularly in the economic area. So.
Oh, thank you for all your time and all your wisdom, because you obviously you really set a tone that I think is going to be very, very important for the 21st century. So thank you for coming.